All right, we are here for day 43. Is it 43 of This Is Not Advice? Taking a question at a time this week, all about remote work.
Because we'll be talking tomorrow with a couple of our friends at Andreessen Horowitz, David and Kara at Upfront. And so you can find us on Twitter tomorrow afternoon as well for more in-depth conversation on it. But for today, we're asking, how do I handle conflict when working remotely?
So this is something I am figuring out anew. Again, not advice because just one person's experience and Min's too. When I think about conflict first really broadly, like when we hear the word conflict, we imagine something that's bad. And almost all progress at work involved resolving some conflict or tension of some kind. It could just mean an emotionally loaded conversation. So imagine things like you're going to give somebody feedback about their performance. Maybe it's their performance review. You're in a negotiation with somebody who you haven't been in a negotiation with before, something like that. And I start by recognizing that many of us have lots of adaptations to how this is supposed to work. And the adaptations just no longer apply. Like the things we used to do to use our like body language to communicate something or soften a blow, like all that, all out the window. And so you sort of have to start from scratch and assume you don't know what you're doing. Then you prepare yourself in advance. And, Min, you reminded me of this, is sometimes you can imagine conflict when it's not there. And the line that a mentor of mine said is curious before furious. Really trying to take in, like, what do I know and what do I not know? And if you're acting on something you're unsure of, make your priority learning as opposed to enacting the conflict. I would also prepare yourself in advance by thinking about scenarios for what might happen if you're going to say something you think is going to be really difficult for someone. Let's say you're going to let somebody go. I mean, that's a conversation for another day. What are the different ways they might respond? Just so you're a little more set and not caught off guard. And then, I would telegraph in advance to the person that you plan to have a conversation that might be loaded in some way. So be really explicit and say like, hey, I want to have a conversation with you. It might be pretty challenging, or, I want to have our annual review. I know it's uncommon that usually we'd get to sit down and do this over a cup of coffee or something, but telegraphing in advance so they're a little prepared. And then once you're in it, I mean, we can have a whole other set of questions around how do you interact with somebody authentically. I found books like Difficult Conversations, frameworks like Nonviolent Communications. I'm starting to learn about authentic relating. Those are all useful. Mainly a principle behind all of them is stick to the stuff you know. My kids learn at school about I statements, like I observed you doing X. Go slowly. Don't lead with your reactions when something happens. Try to respond intentionally. And one thing I'll notice that makes it easier remotely is the mute button. Muting yourself when you think you might be like running away and letting your reactions get the better of you can be really powerful. It slows you down. And then the last thing I'd say is to go back to the person afterward and check in. Hey, that might have been difficult. How did you feel about that? All that kind of stuff. What else would you add, Min?
I would say that right now it is harder to know what other people are doing during the workday, because you can't just turn around or like notice that they're sitting like doing focused work. And so I think explicitly asking for the time is also really important. And it doesn't have to be like a scary thing per se, but just saying like, hey, could I grab like 10 minutes from you like at the end of the day? I just wanted to like tell you something, so that you're less interruptive in that way.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is that the timing, putting the control over timing in their hands is an intentional choice you can make.
Yeah. So we're talking about work. For those of you who might be newer, Roy and I work at a firm called Bloomberg Beta, where we invest in the future of work. And so we're doing This Is Not Advice to talk about your questions about work. And so we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Ask more questions.